Alright, so you stuck around for the first part of the video, watched the first 100 rounds go out. Now, we're going to get into the internals of the AM2 and go over our parts plan for it. Alright, so first things first, we'll lock and clear, visually and physically empty, and we'll start with the slide. Alright, so we will definitely be doing a guide rod. Here's the cool thing with theirs though, we may not have to. We may be able to just do different spring rates. Their guide rod is actually, and the reason it was open like that is because I like to go through things before I do a video, even if I pulled them apart a bunch just to refresh my memory. But you can press the spring here when the back end of the guide rod comes out, so you can actually interchange the springs. So we'll probably do springs to start with. We may do a full capture guide rod, who knows. But that's on a parts list. We got our barrel here. Obviously we don't do barrels, so but they do have plans to make other barrels for the AM2, as far as I know. So not anytime soon. Don't go bothering them and being like Brandon said, because it may not be for a year or two. So let's go ahead and pull out, and as you can see, it's a Glock style front sight, but instead of the terrible stupid nut, they actually just went and put a torque screw in there. Works much better. Let's see here. I believe it should probably be a T7. Yeah. No, actually a T5 or a T6 will fit that. Let's try our T6 here. Yeah, T6. So T6 by 50. Much easier to get a hold of. Most hardware stores are going to have that. Alright, so now to pull the striker out is very similar to about any other striker fired on the market. Pull the sleeve in, take off the back plate, pull the striker out. We'll be doing a performance spring kit all the way around probably. And so, you know, we'll probably do a striker spring and things like that. So let's knock out. And so far, everything takes a 3/32 pin punch. So those are the two I'm using. Let's go ahead and take our extractor out. Alright, so there's our blocker and spring. Alright. So we'll probably be doing a polish blocker like we do for some of the other pistols. And obviously a spring. And so that's it for the slide. I mean, very much like every other striker gun on the market. While they all have minor differences, in essence, a striker gun's a striker gun. What I like about this particular pistol is it is very simplistic on the inside. This will be very easy for the, if you don't go dropping stuff, it'll be very easy for the end user to work on. Installing parts and whatnot. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. And it's not coming back. Give me a minute. Anyway, it's not going to come back to me. So the blocker's held in by the extractor. Sorry, but I'm a little distracted right now with some personal stuff. But as you can see, the extractor is what holds in the blocker. So when you put everything back together, you got to put your blocker in first, then your extractor. And we'll put our roll pin back in. Alright, nice and even front, top and bottom. So we'll put our striker back in. And our barrel, and guide rod. All right. So we're done with the slide. We'll set it off to the side. Now, there is only one pin that holds in the chassis, which is very convenient. It takes 3 30-second punch, drives out of either side. Alright. So, here is probably my favorite part of the design, because we are looking at doing an extended takedown plate. We'll have to probably include the spring with it, because to get the takedown plate out, you're probably going to have to tear up the string. I've done it. I took it out, put it back in, but it was a little more difficult than I had anticipated, and I didn't want to mess up the spring. So we're not going to take that out today. We'll wait until we decide if we're going to do an extended takedown plate or not. But you don't have to remove the takedown plate to get the chassis out of the grip frame. It actually stays in the grip frame, which I think is a really neat design, for the simple fact that that's usually the biggest pain in the butt to deal with when tearing down a pistol. And if you can just circumvent that and get to this part where you're going to be changing more parts than anything, very convenient. It is an ambidextrous mag release. All the magazines are ambidextrous, and so you can see down in here, see if you can see that. I'll grab a pick so that's not, but it's a standard spring, comes up, push it off to what would be my left, the right side, what would be the right side of the frame, and you can pop it out, flip it around, and put it back. All right, so again, like I said earlier on in the shooting part of the video, I like how slim it is. More than likely, though, that's something else we may look at doing, because I'm sure people will want an extended mag release. So that's something we're looking at possibly doing as well. So now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this gun. All right, so it's got its own internal chassis. Okay, everything held together nicely. Now keep in mind, I don't know what the final shipping product is going to look like exactly when you pull the chassis out. This is a sample pistol. This is actually the pistol they use to make the mold guns for holster molds. So we got that one. So there's honestly, I don't know what yours will look like. I'm not saying that to be like, oh, it's going to change. Anything could change between now and them shipping. So this may be it. There may be minute, not super important changes. Mostly when a gun's getting ready to come to market or has just come to market, it'll be minute changes that really don't affect anything. All right, so the great thing about this too is that these two pins that keep the chassis tight, even though it is welded at the front, ours is. Like I said, I don't know if that'll be that way when they start shipping all the time. But what they've done is there's knurling on these two pins on one side. And so what that does is that keeps the pin from being able to move back and forth real easily. Which when it's in the pistol, it's not going to be able to, because the grip frame holds it in place. But it makes it a whole lot easier to work on if you're only doing one or two things. I'll show you how the sear comes apart. I'm not going to take it apart, because the first time I did, the sear spring just took off on me, and it took me forever to find it. It's real easy to do. A quick sear may be something we look at a year or two down the road. Right now, our biggest concentration of effort is going to be on a trigger, guide rod, things like that. The usual stuff we come to market with first. So let's go ahead and take it apart. Take your 3/32. And the great thing about the knurling is it's strong enough that you can feel it bite in when you go and put the pin in. And keep in mind too, yours is probably going to be a lot stiffer than this one. This one's been apart a lot. So that if you go to take yours apart when we start producing parts, you may have to tap it out, no big deal. But that pin, you take out that pin, that releases the slide lock and the slide lock spring. Okay. Alright, so the next pin we're going to take out is going to be the trigger pivot. Now when we take the trigger pivot out, you want to keep a finger up here because it's probably going to not really want to cooperate because the trigger return spring's pretty stout in this thing. So you may have to hold the trigger in place, pop it out. Now what I like to do, and this pin is non-knurled, okay? So when it comes time to put a trigger in and things like that, it's not going to matter which way you drive this pin out. Very slowly remove your punch. And then you can pull the trigger away, trigger return spring, and the trigger bar. Okay? So there's the trigger bar. Trigger return spring. And then the trigger itself. Alright, so the trigger itself has the safety blade spring right there, safety blade, nice metal trigger. This little pin holds it in place. There's really, you just can push it out. Safety blade pops right out and little spring comes out. I mean, just the standard striker gun setup there. I do really like the over travel stop. You can see where it actually does stop against the frame so that you don't have a ton of over travel on the pull. Alright, now this pin, I think it's actually the other way. I can't remember off the top of my head, so we'll try driving from right to left first. And I was wrong. So when you'll go to drive this pin out, for anything we do in the fire control unit, it'll actually go from left to right. And the easiest way to tell, you're probably not going to be able to see it real well. Oh no, I just put it back in backwards earlier. You'll be able to kind of see the striations from where the knurling is interacting, so it's holding it in place. But that pin comes out, and this is the chassis you're left with. This support bar stays in place, doesn't come out. So that's the chassis. That is your serialized part. This is technically the firearm. Alright. So we got our fire control unit here. This time, I'm going to pay attention to what I'm doing. Alright, now you want to keep your finger here and your thumb here when you push that pin out. See how the spring wanted to go? The first time I did this, I didn't have my finger over it and it shot out. Took off across the room. Super fun to find. And that's it. That's your fire control unit right there. Alright. That piece, your ejector, your sear spring. And we have completely disassembled and stripped the AM2. So this is why I really like this gun. It's very simplistic. It'll be easy for the end user to work on. It's nice when companies actually listen to the customers. Alright, so let's go ahead and reassemble the chassis. So the first thing, ooh, and headbutt the camera. First thing we're going to do is put the ejector back in. Now this is the trickiest part of the whole thing. Alright, so your sear spring is going to sit in your sear just like so. Okay, little arm there, and this big arm goes in this cut. Now here's where it gets to where you wish you had tiny elf fingers and probably several hands helping, because you can't always get this in from the top because the ejector does move around, and plus because of the curve to the ejector. See that? You can't force that in from the side, so you got to start the spring underneath, get the arm up, get it all pressed in, and then I like to, oh, see, that's what I'm talking about. That spring will take off. Alright, so drop. Throw the sear in the floor. Alright, so let's try that again. And this will be one of those things that if we end up doing a quick sear or something like that, or a reduced power spring kit, or increased power, anything, whatever spring kits we might do, this will be probably the hardest part. I know I keep repeating that, but it literally took me like 5 minutes to put this thing back together. First time I ever took it apart. Alright, so it doesn't help that I've got oil all over my hands. And what may honestly be easier, and this will, we're having a first time moment together here, guys. is leave the ejector out and put the sear in first and get the pin started so it's holding the spring and the sear in place, and then put the ejector in. I've been doing it the other way. This seems to be a big pain because the spring don't want to cooperate. Oh, you're filming me? Let's be a jerk. Alright, so take our little pin here, get it started, and then we'll just take our ejector, push the sear to the side with the ejector, and just push the pin on through. Alright, and our fire control unit back together. Make sure you have it sprung right. Just push on the sear. As long as it's moving, you're good. Alright, so now we're ready to put that bad boy back in the chassis. This time I'll put the pin in correctly from the right to left. Alright. Now, this is where it can get kind of goofy. First, you're going to want to put your trigger bar in. Okay. So it's right in there, so you have your trigger bar lined up like so. Reason being is because as soon as you go to put your trigger on, you're going to hook into that hole on the trigger bar and push up to where you line up the secondary hole. And we're going to get it started. And we're going to take our trigger return spring. You see the arm goes into this cut. We're going to push our trigger pivot pin all the way through. Get it lined up. Alright. I'm going to take, because here's how this is going to go. Alright. So once you have that in, get your trigger bar hooked up to your trigger, you can push the whole thing over to the right. Now I will usually take my flathead or something similar. And then I've got, adapted for this. Stick that spring up under the trigger bar, like so. It's going to go in that little hole. Boom, you're golden. Alright, so now we take this spring, goes up, like so. Okay, so in, push against that bar. We're going to put our knurled, correction, we're going to put our slide lock on. And you see that little arm right there? That's where the spring goes. Okay, just like so. So you're going to push that up, line up your hole. Now, you will probably have to move the trigger a little bit, because you'll see how that hole's right there in the trigger bar? It's actually a stop for the trigger as well. So you'll move the trigger forward a little bit, get your pin started, knock it home, just test everything, just do this. Trigger bar moves, sear's moving, slide lock, everything's good. So we're ready to put the chassis back in the grip frame. We're going to start at an angle like this, and you may have to do a little forcing. Alright, you'll hear it pop into place. If you're sitting here cramming on this thing and it ain't moving, stop what you're doing and recheck, because you see this pocket. So it goes into this pocket, then down into that pocket. You'll pull the trigger to the rear, or push it, actually, is what you'll really do. And then just snap it on down in there. Take your roll pin. Use your awkward sausage fingers to try and get the pin started. Maybe easier to use a roll pin holder in this case. What's my favorite nickel word? Equidistant. Knock that pin to where it's equidistant on both sides. You're ready to reassemble and function test. Take your slide, stick it back on, pull the trigger to the rear, striker falls, rack, release, reset, falls. Rag it, don't press the safety blade, doesn't go bang. And that's it, guys. That's the internals, and that was our parts plan as we went. We'll probably be sending this thing over to be milled for a Shield Sights RMS or J Point here shortly. Like I said, maybe looking at doing some sights. Definitely a trigger. Definitely springs for the rod, if not a whole new rod. Definitely performance spring kit for the internals. The extension, we'll probably do one for the 10 rounder. Obviously it'll fit the 15 rounder too, but I mean, do you really want another inch or so on the bottom of that? I mean, you could hold it that way if we did, but I joke, but it's a good pistol. And for around $300-400 when this thing is on the market proper, I mean, you can't really go wrong. It's a good little gun. I like it. And that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, when we look at any parts you guys can think of you may want, anybody who's already got one of these before it's really hit the market and has been shooting it a lot, any feedback you got for us, we'll gladly take. But mostly we'll be looking at extended controls, slightly extended controls, trigger, guide rod springs, internal springs, and an extension for the short mag. And that's going to wrap it up, guys. So if you got any questions, feel free to email me at Tango Echo Charlie Hotel at GallowayPrecision.com. Feel free to follow us on social media. Stay up to date on everything Galloway Precision. Be sure to follow us here on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe below. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Vimeo, and Gunstreamer. And as always, be safe, be accurate, and God bless.